So hello and welcome to my apiaries where our flow has finally started. I mentioned to you before about the ivy that was on the way, and we're doing some prep work for the nucs and for the mini plus to make sure that they're ready to receive the flow when it starts. Well, we've had no rain at all since probably mid-July. Well, we've had like maybe 2 mil. That's what I mean. Nothing to get any penetration into the ground. But I'm inhaling now, and all I can smell is the smell of ivy, and it stinks, but it's the most wonderful stink you could ever imagine. When you're a beekeeper and you have fed all your colonies and they're still not as heavy as you want, to have this weather and this sun and the ivy in flower is just the bonus that you really want. Plus the fact we got a lot of crops that have gone into flower this year, cover crops. I did a video on the facile, but there's also a lot of mustard and a lot of mix of stuff. So in some fields there's sarrasin, which is buckwheat. There's also the facile and also the mustard, which is brilliant. So if they're not getting it from the ivy, they're getting it from everywhere else they can. The thing is, what you want is diversity, and to get diversity this time of year is fantastic. Even though the ivy is brilliant, to have other crops alongside it is fantastic for the bees. So they're going into the winter, they're going to be full of pollen. They might not be as heavy as perhaps we'd want, but we've got huge pollen stores. And for us here, we don't have to feed pollen patties, because come the spring, as soon as the weather's warm enough to fly, there's hazel pollen. And I re-examine this issue almost every year since I've become more aware of the needs of bees. And I really don't think that pollen patties for us and supplemental nutrition is ever going to be necessary here, because we live in such a diverse place with all the valleys. We have early hazel, we had a lot of shrubs like camellias and stuff like that dotted around that do give a little bit here and there. And then as soon as you're into them in April, they're away, they're gone. There's just so much abundance of food. But what a fantastic thing to share this. So I just wanted to share this with you because it's often you don't get this, but we haven't had the weather like this since I think it was 2016. Just come back from Vermont actually, and we had the most fantastic ivy flow I've ever seen. It won't be like that this year, but it'll be probably, if it's half as good as that, I'll be happy. I mean, the bees are piling in the pollen. They're not a huge amount of nectar, as I said, but there's some, and it's better than nothing. Every time you look at a colony now, look at a frame of bees, there's nectar in the frame, which is just brilliant. So, while we're here, I just thought I'd quickly show you how I do feed my nucs. It's a pretty simple thing. We have this wooden eek. These are 6-frame Dadant poly nucs, okay? So I have this wooden eek that sits on top here, okay? And I use a piece of plastic that the bees glue down. Look, you can just peel back and look inside. See, look, there's our partition. We don't need all those frames full, but I may even take these out if the weather carries on good. So there's the bees, look, underneath. They build up a little bit on top of there, but it gives a nice circulation across the top of the frames. So then we have a feeder on top of that, and the feeder just sits on a hole just there above the bees. And then they can come up from underneath, they can feed, take it back down. And if you finish with the feeder, you just do this. You just close it back up like that. You leave it a day or so, you push it down, and they glue it shut, and then back on goes your poly roof. It's that simple to remove the feeder. And it's so easy, because what I used to use another sheet of cardboard on top of this, but the cardboard got wet. And if you imagine, if you've got that open, and you've got your feeder on top like that, you've got your eek, which seals it pretty well between the poly box and the top roof, like that. So if you've got a little stone on there, there's not a lot of way for heat to get out. So basically the syrup stays warm inside there. You can see easily when it needs topping up, because you just lift that up and top it up if it needs it. If you had enough, you take it off, you put the eek on another one. What I'm trying to say is, having it open like that doesn't make any difference at all to the bees, because it's the end of the year, it's still warm, so they'll take it down with very little effort on your part. All you're doing is putting syrup right on top of them where they need it and where it stays warm. They build really well in there, and they fill out those frames, and they just sop it up, no problem at all. And incidentally, it's just one thing to note as well. This time of year, if you're seeing colonies that aren't taking up syrup, you want to check them, because they're either queenless or they're or they're totally full of honey, which is not a bad thing because then they finish making their winter bees virtually now already. There's just bees hatching out. Or it's queenless, and you've got a big problem because there's not much you can do now to really rectify that this time of year. So you need to get in there. Every colony that you feed should be just taking it down. Obviously, if you fed them already and they're really full, they might be slower, and there might be the odd one that doesn't take so much. But most of the time, if you see a colony that is not taking in food, it's really probably time to merge that colony with one next door. Check to see if it's queen right. If there's no queen, merge it with the next one. These are some of the nucs we made this summer. They're all treated, all fed. Now they're just filling themselves up even more. These are some of the hives when we go out to the apiaries next year. We just brought them on. Load more around the other side. But overall, it's been a really good season. It's been a hard season. We've learnt a huge amount. We did a lot of insemination early on. And we got some good results from that. And those queens next year are going to be siring our next generation with the genetics we chose. I could sit here all day and watch this. This is just lovely. You know, to be able to experience the start of the autumn flow, the final push by the bees to just get enough stores in for the winter, to get that pollen in, to get those supplies in, you know. You've checked all your colonies, you've configured any frames that needed sorting out. You've done all the work, and this is a kind of almost like a recognition that you've got it right. Because if to get this far throughout the year after doing splits and making queens and everything else, and to have them arrive at this state in the year where they're ready to take that final flow is kind of marvelous, you know. It just, I know we do take from our bees, and a lot of people do comment on that perhaps we take too much, and yes, we probably do. But to be profitable, bees have to perform, you know. And all we do is we set it up for them, we get them to do the work, but they really need this ivy flow. Some people try and take honey from this ivy flow, and I think it's absolutely crazy. This is for the bees. This is for the time when we've exploited them all year, all between middle of April right through till end of September. We exploit our bees. You know, we take off that summer honey, we take off that spring honey, we take nucs, we take splits, and we get them ready for this moment. And you've got to arrive at this moment in the apiary so the bees can kind of have that bit of a give back. We can give them something back by getting them set up, by giving them room, by keeping them strong queen, so that when that flow comes, they can really profit from it. And they set themselves up for the winter. And you just keep an eye on them, and you just nurture them, and they'll make it for the winter absolutely fine. You've got to get the mite numbers down. You've got to treat them well. You've got to give them the space. You know, you've got to manage the frames. But if you do that right, this is kind of like the best part of beekeeping in some respects, because they're doing it all for you. You set it up and they do it. Yet again, I said this before, you know, getting ready for the flow. When they arrive at this point, they'll do all the work. You just have to set it up. And to me, it's almost like confirmation that you've kind of done something right in the year. Because you look at it now, they're just bees flying in, full of pollen, loading up those frames and preparing everything for the winter. So this is where we're harvesting a lot of our drones this summer for our insemination. And here we are, and the weather's still like it was midsummer. It's absolutely glorious, absolutely glorious. It really I consider myself incredibly lucky to be able to experience this every day of my life, being it rainy, drizzly or sunny and gorgeous. Because the bees are always there, they're always getting on with what they're doing. And it's kind of, I feel kind of humbled to be able to do this, you know. So all there is to do now is monitor the hives as they're filling up, keep an eye on the weather, keep an eye on the temperatures. If we get a lot of low temperatures and the ivy starts to go over, then we're going to have to do a rapid check and a rapid, quick rethink of our bees' needs. But I think overall we're nearly there. We should be okay. The bees are topping up well. They've all been fed and treated well early this year. So this is all the bonus. This is what the bees are doing for themselves with our help. So all we need to do is keep an eye on things, but we should be okay. Every year I worry about this, and I think I worry about it in the spring, I worry about it in the summer, but obviously now is critical because very soon there'll be nothing we can do at all to our bees apart from put candy on. And as a beekeeper who's got, you know, a lot of colonies, putting candy on is a very expensive exercise at the wrong time of year. Because A, you've never got enough in stock, and B, you panic and put too much on. The best thing is to feed them now while you can. They just take it down so easily, and they store it where they want it. And also, it's one thing feeding candy, but don't forget, if they are feeding on nectar and they're bringing in nectar, nectar does contain much more trace elements and much more vitamins they need. It's contained in the honey. Whereas if we give candy, it doesn't have so much. It hardly has anything. It only has the sucrose or the whatever base of sugar you use, but it doesn't have the vitamins and the minerals that you get from honey. And that's why it's so important to give them the max when you can. Feeding them later on in the winter will help and will keep them alive, but it doesn't do a good as job. And also, as I say, it's extremely expensive. So let the bees do it now. Have a good day. I am. This is gorgeous.